Hello and welcome again to another episode of This Week in Christian History. And we, as always, are interested to dig a little bit deeper into some of our Christian History Today posts and comments that we get to make each week about something interesting that happened on this day in Christian history. And we are focusing in on, as I look at my cheat sheet notes. April 21st, 1855 is the day that Dwight L. Moody accepted Jesus Christ. And man, what a day that was for the rest of the world. How about that? We're very pleased to have Dr. Gregg Quiggle with us here, who is formerly of the Moody Bible Institute and is one of the premier, if not the premier, biographer on Reverend Moody. Dr. Quiggle, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Well, it's wonderful to be with you. I'm glad you're talking about Dwight Moody.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, for those who might not be as totally familiar with him or kind of how he got started in his ministry, we'd love to know some background just on him as an individual, including then maybe how that evolved into what would become this, international ministry for a guy from England that ends up in, where he ends up showing up and being able to have this worldwide reach, man. I think it'd be fantastic to know.
Yeah, Moody is, if you want to make an argument for God having a sense of humor, or also the power of God's grace.
Yeah.
Dwight Moody's kind of a running argument for that. Moody was born in Western Massachusetts,
Oh, okay. New
uh,
England. Excuse me. I said England. I should have said New England.
New England.
That dropped out. Sorry.
Yes, he is in 1837. He's born on his mother's birthday.
Huh.
And the town is on the Connecticut River. In fact, it's about 20 miles north of where Jonathan Edwards lived, to
Wow.
give you a reference point.
Sure.
So it's a stereotypical little New England town. Um, and his father is probably an alcoholic.
Mm.
The family is on the edge. And when he is four, his dad comes home from work. He was a bricklayer and complaining of pain in his abdomen. And by that evening, he was dead.
Wow.
And his mom was pregnant with twins, 8 months. And they were so far in debt that by the time the sun went down, the debt collectors had come and started stripping the house.
Oh my.
So they were able to hide his dad's bricklaying tools up in the attic, and they took the one cow they had, and she told a couple of the boys go hide it in the woods. Um, but they had nothing. I think she had, if I remember right, there were six kids already, and weren't really connected to the church at all.
Okay.
And the family, she got multiple advices. Say, you got to farm these kids out. You can't make it. And she said, no, I want to keep my family together. And the local Unitarian minister
Mm.
showed up, young guy, recent Harvard grad, um, Oliver Everett, and he really paid attention to the family. And Moody talked about the impact this man made on him in terms of demonstrating the love of God
Mm.
practically. So
Mhm.
some of the uncles pitched in, and the minister pitched in, and so they were able to stay together. But education, very little education. You got maybe 5 years of formal education. Um, The boys were often farmed out to older couples who didn't have boys in exchange for meals. They
Wow.
would go and live with another family, do chores, things like that, in exchange for food. Um, Moody himself was, we would today say ADHD. He was
Okay.
one of those kind of kids. So even if he would have had time for school, he probably wouldn't have done very well anyway. Kind of always in trouble. There are stories about stuff he was doing as a kid. Um, School plays, he hit a cat under a box so it jumped out in the middle of the play. He he put up signs for a fake meeting, and everybody showed out. This famous temperance speaker was coming, and Moody had made this whole thing up, and he's hiding behind a tree laughing. The whole village shows up, and so he was one of those kind of guys. Um, and when he gets to be around 17,
Hmm.
he's like, I can't stay here anymore. So he goes to Boston, and that gets us to your date.
Yes.
And in Boston, he goes and gets a job at one of his uncle's stores. His uncle has a shoe store.
Ah, okay.
And the deal is the uncle says, I'll give you a job on one condition. You have to go to Sunday school. Okay. So he goes to the Congregational Church there in Boston, and Edwin Kimball is the Sunday school teacher's name. And Moody, he can hardly read. In fact, in my books or when I'm teaching students, I just show them some of Moody's writing. Punctuation was optional for Moody, and spelling was. I mean, he writes back home, and he's writing to his brother. I think it's George, and he's trying to write somewhere the psalmist says, and he spells psalmist Saimest. That's psalmist, and says is Sais. So it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Wow.
So he goes to this Sunday school class, and a lot of the other boys, young men, are Harvard students. And so the guy says, well, open your Bible to John. Well, Moody, and he can tell. And at one point, Kimball just says, the Lord was telling me I got to go talk to this guy. So he goes to the shoe store, and Kimball says, I don't remember what I told him. And Moody will even say, I'm not sure exactly what he told me, but I remember that man's hand on my shoulder.
Hmm.
And I knew he loved me, and I knew Jesus loved me. And he has a conversion experience. Now, what he fully understood is not clear. He tried to join the church and he couldn't give a coherent testimony. So he had to wait a year before they accepted him fully into
Really?
membership. Yeah, because the interview is something like, well, what has Jesus done for you? Oh, well, he's done many things for us. I think he was converted, but he had such little knowledge that for Moody, this is the classic case of believe in order to understand.
Mm.
So his life is one growing in understanding, and this is a guy again that is not a reader. Most of Moody's theology is caught rather than taught. He listens and watches and observes, and that's how he
And
learns.
absorbs it after that. But I mean, but doesn't this, so many people, right? Just pick any life anywhere. So much of what you end up being is where you have been and how you became that thing, whatever that is. Benjamin Franklin gets to be a great printer because he's
Yep.
hanging out in the print shops, right, with his brother or whatever, whoever, right? I mean, it's a thing that happens over a period of time, and so. D- does Moody take that whole, hey, look, there are plenty of other people out there like me that might have heard that they may not be able to articulate it exactly right. We need to be able to give them the resources and the tools so that they will understand those things because I've walked in those shoes. Or is that a stretch? Is that
That's
not real?
part of it. The other
Okay.
part of it is Moody has, one guy says he has an almost womanly love for children. He
Mm,
knows what it's like to be a child that is that comes from a rough back and this single parent.
yeah.
And he knows what it's like to feel uneducated. He regularly would say, I don't have I didn't the Lord didn't give me an education. I don't have an education. And he would regret that all the time. In fact, if I may, you
Mm,
indicated Reverend Moody. He was never ordained.
really?
And if you made the mistake of introducing him as Reverend Moody, he would stop you. I am not Reverend Moody. I'm Mr. Moody. I'm a plain old Sunday school teacher from Chicago. Never
Wow.
pastored anything. He was just a Sunday school teacher.
Wow. Oh,
So
cool.
he was simple and he knew how to connect to people. And when you listen to people talk about him, what made Moody effective was his earnestness.
Mm.
It wasn't the rhetoric. Spurgeon said Moody was the only man he knew who could say Mesopotamia in two syllables. He, sp he spoke outrageously fast. He slaughtered the king's English,
Huh.
and it was a Yankee twang, that New England thing.
Mm.
Never said Daniel, always said Daniel.
Mm.
250 words a minute they figured he spoke at, which is outrageous fast. But he always, people could tell, number one, he cared and he
Mm.
believed. He really believed what he was talking about,
Mhm.
and that degree of earnestness. And so he connects with people, particularly people that are at the bottom.
Mm.
And that's what's going to drive him,
Mhm.
because he starts in Boston, he gets bored in Boston. And the place to go if you're a young man in the North anyway during that time is Chicago, because Chicago is exploding. Chicago in 1837, when Moody is born, about 17 buildings. By 1900, it's 1.9 million people. It's the fifth largest city in the world. That's
Wow.
63 years. And in 1871, 25% of it burned down. That's the
Right.
Chicago fire. So you can imagine, just imagine the speed at which this thing is growing, the opportunities. People are making millions and losing millions,
Mm.
almost literally month to month. So there's massive opportunities. So he goes to Chicago. And one of the reasons you can tell that he's so really genuinely converted is he is he is deeply committed to spreading the gospel, sharing the gospel. And especially with kids.
Mm.
So he goes to street kids, immigrant kids, the Catholic kids, the kids that are living in the slums in the city in Chicago. That's where he goes. And he starts bringing them to church. This is back when you pew rented, and he would rent a pew and bring these kids to Sunday school. And I mean, this is a disaster. These kids aren't dressed right. And so fairly quickly you say this is not a good idea. So he says, "Fine, I'll go where they are." Rents a saloon, cleans it out, and starts a Sunday school. And it's the stories are remarkable.
How about that? Hey, we're enjoying our conversation we're having here with Dr. Gregg Quiggle, and we're talking about the not Reverend Dwight L. Moody, and are enjoying this dialogue and conversation. So, I mean, is part of it um, uh, what churches when he is renting the pews and taking the kids in there, is that in any particular denomination or a church that is there that he was affiliated
It's
with?
congregational,
Okay.
but
Okay.
this is what is happening in America during this time after the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
Is you have massive industrialization. So Chicago's typical. You can guess, and it's massive immigration. So you have these waves of people coming in,
Mm-hmm.
German, uh, Southern German Catholics, Irish, Polish, Italian, Jews, and guys like Moody from the countryside. They're all coming in. They're going to make their way in the new city. And you have these huge new industrial kind of things starting. So, for example, at one point, there are 400 million board feet of lumber stored on the lakefront in Chicago. because there's all these white pine forests in Wisconsin and Michigan. They're cutting these
Hmm.
things down, floating them down Lake Michigan. They're making they're making lumber, planing them out in Chicago, and then Sears and all these people, the catalog, you can buy your house. They in Iowa, a bunch of people go out to Iowa, say we want to start a town. They order it on the Sears catalog. They build it in Chicago, put it on a train, boom. And when that train comes back, it's filled with pigs and cows and wheat. Chicago is the largest wheat port in the world. They are processing millions of cattle and pigs, Armour, Swift,
Sure.
all these places. In fact, Henry Ford gets the idea for the assembly line by watching how these meat packers are disassembling animals.
Hmm.
So they have taken what was a skilled craft butcher and they've turned it into these giant factories where,
Right.
what's your job? Well, I cut the throat, I cut it in half, I cut the back leg off, I cut, boom, 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 boom. 34 minutes to totally disassemble a cow. So, and there's just waves of these people coming in. They're being paid incredibly low wages. There is no safety. There's no bathrooms. They have
Mm.
to relieve themselves in the corners in the factory. You cut your hand or your arm, tough luck, pal.
Right.
Six days a week, 12-hour shifts. Um, and
Because
so,
if you don't want the job and you don't like it, guess what? There's 12 of them right out the door that's been here since breakfast waiting for you to trip. Okay.
yep, there's
And
another
so,
train coming in town, and it's
yeah.
got a bunch of guys from southern Germany on it, and they need a job. So that's what's happening. And the Protestant church has no idea how to deal with this.
Hmm.
They 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 don't know what to do with these people. They're terrified by it. And so you've got all these kids that are literally living on the street. And Moody gets these kids. He knows what they feel like. He just gets it. He has a little horse. He fills his pocket with candy and he starts riding down the street throwing out candy and says, "Follow me." And they follow him and he's renting this saloon. And they're one of my favorite stories is a guy goes to see him and he gets to the place and Moody has a little African American boy on his lap and he's got a Bible open and he's trying to read to this boy the story of the prodigal son.
Hmm.
And Moody is so undereducated that he can't read all the words.
Hmm.
He has to skip some of the words. He's trying to tell it, but he wants to tell this boy about the Bible. So he gets done, and the guy walks up to him, and Moody looks at him and he says, "Reynolds, I ain't got no education, but I love Jesus, and I want to do something for him. Will you pray for me?"
Hmm.
And um, so he's in there. This is who he is. He's in with these kids. He's wrestling on the floor with them. He's giving them candy. He's telling them Bible stories. He's going to their house. Dad's a drunk and he'll go in and take the whiskey bottle and dump it in the street. He gets beat up. Um, the Catholics don't like him because he's a Protestant, but then they do start to like him. So the kids start calling him Father Moody. Um,
Well, what's he doing for a living at this time? I mean, how's he making his own ends
he
meet?
was selling shoes. He made good money.
Okay. From his
And
uncle,
then,
just things he learned from his uncle's shop
yeah,
or
he
okay.
was a salesman. Every job he went, he was the number one salesman. Then he goes to work full time for the YMCA.
Ah, I didn't know that. Okay.
And then most of the time, he is not taking a salary. He's living off his savings and he's sleeping in the YMCA
Hmm.
and he's raising money. At one point, he tells how many families he's supporting himself. He has like 800 families that are dependent on him for firewood, food. He has a horse that he goes out and gets wood, coal. Uh, Another story, I mean, these stories are just so unbelievable that
Sure.
there's a little girl in his Sunday school, and he finds out she had drowned. She had drowned because the family was heating their place in the winter by the kids fishing wood out of the Chicago River. And she saw this big piece and it was out too far, and she tried to reach it and fell in and drowned.
I'll be.
And he takes his boy and goes, it's a little bit later in his career, but he goes to visit the family. And the father's drunk. He's in the corner. And the mom is distraught. And she said, we can't afford to bury our daughter. And she's going to end up in an unmarked pauper's grave. And Moody said, I'll never let a poor kid be buried without a marker again. I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of poor children he personally paid to make sure they had a grave, a marker. That, I'm never going to let that happen. I will not let a poor child die without a place where mom can go and visit their son or daughter.
Right.
Um,
Wow.
so he's just this is who he is. He's feeding them. He's telling them about Jesus. He's in there getting his hands messy, and
Mhm.
he's raising money now. The business community is looking at this and they're saying, "Hey, this guy's effective." 1860. By then, the Sunday school's big. It's over 1,000. Abraham Lincoln is on his way to D.C. for the first inaugural, and he
Mhm.
stops in because he's heard about the Sunday school in Chicago.
Come on.
Yep. So he stops in and he said, I'll stop by on one condition. I'm not going to say anything. Well, Moody's going to get him to say something. So he stops in and Moody says, well, I'm sure our new president would want to say something like, but this is how this is going to go. He's going to earn a reputation of being able to work with these people, of being earnest, of being honest. Millions of dollars go through his hands. There's never any scandal about money. Um, and so he starts off doing these Sunday schools. The Sunday school is eventually going to become what is today known as Moody Memorial Church,
Okay.
because what's going to happen is these people are their parents are going to start coming,
Mm.
but they just don't feel comfortable in the normal church.
Right.
These are
Working class folks, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
And so he starts a non-denominational church, and it becomes Moody. People say, well, he was the first pastor. No, he never pastored the church. In fact, Moody never wanted anything named after himself.
hmm.
They didn't name it after him till after he was dead, and he's still.
Really?
Same with Moody Bible Institute. They would not, Mr. Moody would flip out if he knew they named it after him. Never
Wow.
wanted his picture taken, did not want anything named after himself. If you were going to one of his meetings and you were on the platform, you better have a sermon in your pocket, because he would often, on the way up, turn around and say, I've spoken enough. It's your turn tonight. Uh,
Mm.
always, Moody always was give it away, give it to somebody else, make sure somebody else, support the other guy. Um, one of the genuinely humble guy. So this thing goes like this. It's going. Civil War comes along. He's part of what's called the U.S. Christian Commission, which was started by the YMCA,
Hmm.
and they worked with Union troops, but they also worked with Confederate prisoners. There was a large prisoner of war camp in Chicago, which was an awful place.
Mm.
It was every bit as bad as Andersonville,
Wow.
but because the Union won, that's the story that gets told. And Moody was there working with Southern troops, with prisoners there. He went to the front 9 times, got very close with General Grant. When
Mm.
Richmond fell, Grant invited Moody to ride into Richmond with him. And Grant, when he was president, came to Moody's meetings in Philadelphia and brought his cabinet.
Really?
Yep.
I've never heard that story. Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah. So he was also involved with General O. O. Howard.
Okay.
Howard was part of Reconstruction. Howard
Right.
University was named after um, General Howard. So he was involved with him.
Howard
Um,
was the one that really that stood up all of the Freedmen's Bureau, right?
yes.
I mean that was part of his back. If I recall correctly, that's
Yes. And Moody, yeah, Howard had Moody preach to his troops regularly.
hmm.
So Moody was at Shiloh, a couple of those battles. So this is not a guy that is, he buried the dead. He worked with the wounded. Um, he was in it up to his neck. He was in the slums. He was in the Civil War. Um, and so he does this. And at one point, he's burning out in Chicago. And so he decides he wants to be a traveling itinerant evangelist. And he goes to Great Britain. And he had made several trips before, but his big meetings are in the 1870s.
Okay.
And that's when he becomes famous. He's over there by the end of his meetings in London. In the London meetings, he speaks to somewhere around 2.5 million people.
Wow.
So Edinburgh, and he's even in Dublin, which is, Catholic to the bone, but
Right.
he's invited there. It goes well. He gets along with the Catholic Church. So he's a traveling evangelist. He's doing revivals, what we would call revival meetings, both in the United Kingdom and in the United States. 1880s, he starts to shift and he shifts into education.
Mm.
And the first school he starts 5 schools. The first school he starts is for poor girls
Okay.
in Massachusetts. The story is he works in Chicago, but he eventually moves back to his hometown in Northfield. He's riding up in the hills behind his place, and where he lives is just stunningly beautiful. You stand on
Mm.
his front porch and you look up the river, and you can literally look into Vermont and New Hampshire. It's that close to the border.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
Is it
and
a big kind of blue house or something like
it's
that, Dwight?
white.
It's white.
Well, the birth house is white. The
Gotcha.
family estate is bluish kind
Okay.
of
I've
thing.
just seen some pictures. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm just putting it in my brain.
And he's up in the hills there, and he comes to this cabin where there's a guy who has got 2 daughters. He's reading the Greek New Testament to these 2 daughters. They're plaiting straw hats. And the father's an invalid. Had a college grad, but something had happened and these girls were very smart, obviously, and these hats were the way the family was surviving. And Moody's there with his brother, and they talk, and after a while he leaves, and he just says to his brother, "These girls are really smart. They'll never get an education. This isn't right. We got to do something about this." So he starts the Northfield Seminary for Young Ladies, and I think it's 1886.
Okay.
That is, um, for poor girls, so they can go to college. It's a college prep. Shortly thereafter, he starts a school for poor boys on the other side of the river, Mount Hermon School for Boys. Then he starts Moody Bible Institute in Chicago. Then he starts Northfield Bible Institute in
Hmm.
Northfield.
Hmm.
And then he's also involved and starts Glasgow Bible Institute in Glasgow, Scotland.
Huh.
Now, of all those schools, Northfield Bible Institute is gone.
Hmm.
Glasgow, what was left of it, closed about 10 years ago. the two schools, the boys' school and the girls' school, merged, and it's now called Northfield Mount Hermon, and it's a New England prep school. I wouldn't say it's even really religious anymore.
Mm,
Um, and then Moody Bible Institute is still around.
sure.
So, so he makes this shift. He goes into education, and then the other thing he gets into is publishing. And the publishing thing is um, these converts need material, and the material is too expensive and not approachable. So he kills two birds with one stone. He puts together small libraries of paperbacks.
Hmm.
The first one is a collection of Spurgeon's work,
Okay.
and he has the boys from the school go around selling these as a way to help pay for school. They're
Hmm.
called coal porters, Bible peddlers. And eventually this expands into what's today is called Moody Publishers. So yeah, so that the idea was to make inexpensive literature that would be available for Christian lay people to help them grow in the faith is what drives it.
Not only affordable, but nobody's coming up and doing some deep theological, hey, let's go see what Augustine and Pelagius would have said about this, right? Nobody's digging into, hey, let's kind of keep it, you know, it doesn't mean they don't have the capacity to understand it. They're just not at a place yet necessarily where that's really going to be a part of their growth. Let's make it easy for them to get a hold of, make sure that it's something that they understand and that is relevant maybe to where they are in their own faith journey. So
Yes, as the publisher has grown, they have occasionally done, I will call it academic light. But by and large, for years they did, for example, Sunday school material and
hmm,
stuff for rural pastors.
sure.
And a lot of it is practical Christian living kind of stuff. If you go through the catalog, you'll see
Hmm.
it's
Oh yeah.
that kind of stuff. It's ministry kind of stuff rather
Right.
than academic. It's not an academic publishing house.
Right.
Um, so you know that's kind of what Moody did. So you had this kid who is, born in the middle of nowhere in New England with virtually no education, who goes through this process of really getting to know the Lord. And then out of this, first you get this Sunday school and the church, and then there's involvement in the Civil War, there's international revivalist, there's schools, also Bible conferences.
Right.
I'm sure your listeners are familiar with the Bible conference. Moody really is at the center of that, Northfield Bible conferences. He's also incredibly influential in the United Kingdom and England, Scotland. They're called Moody Sankey revivals.
Hmm.
So he's involved in that, ministering to military people, the U.S. Christian Commission. He also was involved in that in the Spanish American War. He served with them then. So just a multiplicity of things.
Right.
In fact, I don't know, it was 15 years ago, I was plowing through some letters, and there was a letter from Billy Graham to one of Dwight Moody's granddaughters.
Really.
And he said, I wonder if you all are aware of all the ministries that can be traced back to Mr. Moody's work. And if you start pulling them all back, I mean, Billy Graham deliberately copied Dwight Moody. Dwight Moody was his model.
Hmm.
You remember just before Mr. Graham died, he said, someday you'll hear Billy Graham is dead. Don't you believe a word of it? He's more alive now. That's a direct quote from Dwight Moody. Dwight Moody said the same thing. It's a direct quote from Moody. And Graham regularly talked about how he patterned himself Mr. Moody was the guy that decided I need somebody that can sing. And he got a guy named Ira Sankey. Moody was tone deaf. But
Really?
yep. But Billy Graham saw how it worked for Moody. He was a student out here at Wheaton College. I'm in Wheaton, Illinois. He
Right.
was listening to Moody Radio, and guess who was on Moody Radio? George Beverly Shea.
Wow.
So he went down to the studio and said, "You're coming with me." Dwight Moody heard Ira Sankey sing one time and walked up to him and said, "What do you do?" "I work for the U.S. Post Office." "No, you don't. You're working for me. You're
Wow.
coming with me."
Well, how did he grow this? This is such a fascinating piece to think about. All it's almost kind of like watching Forrest Gump over again, right? He shows up
Yes.
at all these places with all of these fascinating people and doing his own thing. But how did he actually get into the mechanics of growing an organization? Like, I mean, he may plenty of people could have a vision or a heart or a desire, but at the end of the day, somebody's got to keep the trains running on time, and somebody's got to make sure that the envelopes are getting opened up, and somebody's got to make sure you're buying the printing equipment, and I mean, an organization like that, a ministry like that. How did he evolve in just how that actually kind of came together?
That's a really good question. First off, he had a natural business sense.
Mm,
Um, they talk about Yankee ingenuity. He was a
yeah,
New Englander, and he was
sure.
a Yankee ingenuity guy. He was a New England farmer, and he was a common sense guy, and he was a no nonsense guy, and he was a simple guy. So, and he knew how to sell. So you put this all together, um, and Moody's knack was he had the ability to see what needed to be done,
Hmm.
and then he had the capacity to rally people to do it.
Mm,
So I used to tell kids at Moody this all the time. I still do when people say, "Well, what can we walk away from Moody?" Especially young people, I'll say, "Here's what Mr. Moody would tell you. Find the thing that needs to be done that nobody else is doing
mm,
and do that." That's what he did. He wanted to work in the church, and he wasn't qualified. He didn't speak right. He didn't dress right. He didn't. So you know what he did? He looked around and said, "Nobody's working with these street kids. So I'm going to do that because somebody needs to do that." And he rolled up his sleeves and did it. Find the thing that needs to be done that nobody else is doing. And then parallel to that, Moody trusted God to use the people that were already doing things. So instead of saying, "Well, I know they're doing that, but I think I can do it better," he would say, "They're already doing that. I'm going to trust God to let them keep doing that. Let me
right.
find what isn't being done yet." Or they're doing that. How can I help them do that and then get out of the way? So he would come alongside to support or find the thing that needs to be done. Decisive, quick. Business people liked him, so he was able to raise money
Mm,
because he was decisive. He could see clearly what needed to be done and had the
right.
capacity to get it done.
Right. It's not like a bunch of Baptists having to go back to a committee of
Well,
whatever and go back and chew on it a while. And let me go back and run it to the general session, or let me go see what somebody else says back at the diocese, or let me see what. No,
he didn't
that's
have
a good
time for that.
idea. We'll do it. Let's do it. I mean, but did he have a core crew of people that kind of hung with him during all of that? Accountants and people that were managers of all these things?
Um, that's a good question. Um,
I mean, even if you look at it, and I don't mean to interrupt, it's,
no,
you
no.
look at it just from an organizational
Yeah.
capacity building thing to be able to build these ministries. in a way, at the end of the day, you still got to get the payroll out. You still got to be able to make sure that the rent's paid or that the note's paid on the building that you put together or, or whatever. And so there's still this administrative, I don't want to say bureaucracy, but I want to say that there's something there that's got to be able to take vision idea into practical and reality pieces. And if you've got a knack for understanding that's a good idea, sooner or later somebody's got to be able to understand how to go put all that together, right?
You know,
I mean,
that's an excellent question, Nick. And I hadn't there are cadres of guys around him that are, I would call, they're not manager types. They're spiritual brethren types.
okay.
Wow.
Well,
No,
I just want to, I mean,
that's a really good question. My guess is, I haven't dug into that before, but my guess is he would find guys that could do that. And then what he was good at is what needs to be done, and then I'll get the money for it. And some of the some of the cables are unbelievable. He'll send a guy like Cyrus McCormick.
yeah.
He'll say, McCormick, I need $10,000 by Tuesday, Moody.
That was it. And he
That
probably
was it.
got it,
And he
didn't
got it.
he?
And he got it because they knew who he
Right.
was, what he was going to do with it, and they got stuff done. So, but who that, wow, that's a really good question.
Well, that's gonna be, I mean, another, and the
Yeah.
other thing that kind of always, he doesn't seem like somebody who was super interested in getting into secondary or maybe even tertiary theological conversations and
No.
dialogue. It was, hey, we're going to keep the big thing, or the main thing, right? I mean,
Yes,
is that a fair assessment?
it is. And that bit him sometimes.
Mm,
Um, he was involved, for example, Frances Willard, who
hmm
was the founder of the women's Christian temperance movement. They started out together. And he finally broke with her because she wanted to talk about temperance too much. Moody believed in temperance, but he didn't believe in temperance to the point that he thought it interfered with his gospel
hmm
presentations.
hmm
He was premillennial,
hmm
which he got from Spurgeon and the Brethren.
hmm
And he would talk about that, but he would also say, we're not going to divide if our watches don't have the same time. Um, and he was he had a wide group of people that he would be able to bring together for these meetings. One of the first things that really stunned me, I was teaching at Moody, and Moody is, conservative, fundamentalist kind of thing. Okay,
hmm
okay. So I thought, well, Mr. Moody was a fundamentalist evangelist.
hmm
Well, sort of. I start reading, and he's buddies with all these people that are later big time liberals.
Huh.
Well, how in the world did that work? Well, if they were talking about Jesus, he was okay with it. So you see these guys like William Rainey Harper, who's this left wing biblical critic guy down at the University of Chicago. And he's writing letters to Mr. Moody saying things like, Hey, Moody, will you come down and do a revival among our students? People think you and I don't agree, but we know we really do. Well, then, no, they don't. But that's the power of Moody,
Ah,
that a guy that was a biblical critic like that would actually want Moody to come down and do a revival among
right,
students.
right.
Um, so you it was Washington Gladden, Rauschenbusch
Hmm.
translated Sankey's hymns into German for his congregation to sing. He loved Moody.
Wow.
I mean, so there was, and Henry Drummond, leading theistic evolutionist, he was Moody's boy. Moody loved Henry Drummond. Um, and then he also loved R.A. Torrey and these other guys that are, in fact, when Moody dies, these guys turn on each other. As long as he's alive, there are meetings in the 1880s and 90s at Northfield where he has both these guys preaching at these Bible conferences. And there's a meeting, I think it's Washington Gladden and somebody else, and they're just at each other. And they both go to Moody, and Moody says, "Okay, come here. We're going to go in my office and pray. Dear Lord, please help our higher critic friend in his Bible studies. Dear Lord, help our conservative friend to be more loving. Amen." That's it. We're not going to talk about this. Now, if you push him, he's
Yeah.
very conservative, but he doesn't want, he's saying things like, can't they stop bringing out these theories until we can get more people saved?
Mm.
So, so he's a keep the main thing the main thing.
Hmm.
That bites him a little bit. In fact, his two boys, one boy becomes a social gospeler, and the other one becomes a fundamentalist. So you can see it even in in
Yeah.
his own family. The other place it bites him is in the South in the 1870s. Everything Moody did was fully integrated in the North.
Hmm.
And he's right on the cutting edge with women. I mean, his first school is for women, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah.
That first school in Northfield, he literally sends a woman to uh, a Native American reservation in Oklahoma and says, "Find me 12 girls that that will go back to their people and educate them." He's aggressively bringing in ex-slaves, children of slaves.
Right.
When he comes to the South, he goes to Augusta, Georgia in 1875, I think, six. And he gets there. The meetings had already started and they're segregated. And he's at first angry, but then he backs up and he bails and he says, "Well, this is a local issue. I don't want to get involved in this."
Hmm.
That's when and 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 he doesn't even speak on lynching, which is he that's when it bites him because he knows this. He had been on record about this for a long time that this is not right.
Right.
But when he gets there, because he wants to, that's when his laser focus is on, I only want to talk on one issue. That's the kind of place that gets him in trouble. There are times he needed to say something,
Hmm.
but he didn't. There are other times, and the other place he didn't say as much as he could have was probably on things like working conditions.
Hmm.
And then the way he's interpreted is, well, he was pro-business. Well, that's true, but the other side to that is, and this is where I think you have to be, he had fifth grade education. So to what extent can you expect this guy to understand economics
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
sociology and all this other kind of stuff? And for heaven's sakes, he was literally feeding thousands. There are tens of thousands of people that rescue missions, soup kitchens, employment agencies, every place he went. That's the other thing I should make very clear. Moody never separated gospel preaching from practical ministry to the poor, ever. You always make sure that poor people have something to eat. You always make sure that you tell them about Jesus. Now, is it prioritized? Yes, but you never do one without the other.
Wow.
You just
Well, I
never
mean,
do.
but from where he came, what else would he know to do?
That's exactly
I mean,
right.
he said, I've been that guy. Okay. I know that feeling. I know exactly what that's like. And I'm not ever going to let that be a thing, that I won't keep up with both of those things. Right.
Yes. So when you look at his record, when you go to places and see what he did, yes, he starts evangelistic things, but he's also starting um, employment agencies. He's also starting soup kitchens. He's also starting ministries to children that have handicaps. He's doing the thing about burying, you know, poor kids. He's involved in temperance movements. And he, you know, it's a seamless garment for Dwight. He's
Right.
accused unfairly. In fact, at the center of my work is to try to get people to rethink about who Moody is. They think of him as just an evangelist.
Hmm.
That's unfair. Moody never separated evangelism from social action. The
Mm.
difference is for Moody, social action wasn't a government thing or a big policy thing or an economic thing. It was simple. You read the Bible. What does the Bible say? Take care of poor people. So what do you do? Well, this guy over here needs something to eat, so I better figure out how to do that. Or this neighborhood needs some clothes. Okay, so let's sit down and figure out how to get these people clothes. He's that kind of guy. And he thinks about it this way. When a person is converted, two things happen. If their poverty is a function of a vice, laziness or alcoholism or something like that, he thinks, well, the gospel will work on that. But secondarily, he also thinks that the gospel forces you to become a charity yourself.
Mm.
No person who loves Jesus cannot care about the poor. You cannot love Jesus and ignore the poor. And so when you are preaching the, and this is Spurgeon the same way. Spurgeon would 1 day a week or 2 days a week take his Bible, fill his pocket with shillings, and go through the neighborhoods in London.
Hmm.
If they didn't have anything to eat, he'd give them money to buy food. If they didn't know Jesus, he'd tell them about Jesus. That's Dwight Moody. If they need firewood, he'd give them firewood. If they didn't know Jesus, he'd tell them about Jesus.
Hmm.
They were just two things that were going together. And
Right.
I think that's why he had such a high degree of credibility.
Sure, because people saw that happening and saw it and maybe even saw it in him when they might not even be doing it so much themselves. But that's another that's probably another podcast for another day. How about
Yes.
that? That would what a fascinating person. And so tell us about the book you wrote on him and some of your work that you've done along Moody.
Yeah, I did a book called Bread and Bibles. And the
Mm.
reason I did that is because the narrative is that Dwight Moody is responsible for turning evangelicals away from social engagement solely towards evangelism.
Mm.
And I actually, this is kind of crazy. I was taking a class, a seminar, a social gospel seminar at a Catholic university, Marquette University, in a PhD program. And I asked my professor, Catholic guy, Patrick Carey, I said, Dr. Carey, can I write on Dwight Moody? Because he's in this time period. And he's like, yeah, he's an interesting guy. I'll let you do that. So I read all the secondary literature and I all said, yeah, well, Moody didn't care about poor people. He just did evangelism. So I write this seminar paper, and so you present it to the class, and then afterwards you meet with the prof, and I get done, and he calls me in his office, says, "Okay, Greg, I'm interested in paper." He said, "What's the name of the place you work again?" I said, "Moody Bible Institute." He said, "Is there a Rauschenbusch Bible Institute anywhere?" I said, "No." He said, "Who's been running all these rescue missions all these years?" And I'm starting to go,
Mm.
this is interesting. And he starts pushing me, and I'm like, you know what? I don't think I did a fair job on this. So here's
Mm.
this Catholic professor at a Jesuit university who's telling me I'm teaching at Moody Bible Institute, and I don't even know the guy that the place is named after. So this was very early in my career. So I started that's what turned it, and I started reading, and I didn't know. I didn't know any of these stories.
Yeah.
I only knew him as an evangelist. I didn't know that he was feeding people every week. That I didn't know anything about the Civil War. I didn't know about going to Edinburgh and helping a place called Carruthers Close that was for drug addicts and all this other kind of stuff that he was doing for orphan children. And so I thought, well, someday somebody needs to write a book on this. And at some point I looked in the mirror and said, well, it ought to be you.
Someday is here and somebody is here as well, and he's me.
Yeah,
So,
so that's the origins of the book, and that's what it's about.
very fine. Well, we're going to put all of that into our show notes and other things so that people can find that and be able to learn more about this fascinating guy who, literally put his feet in his mouth where his heart was, right? And not everybody could say that, and certainly not at the idea of being able to see how the Lord blessed all of that in
Yeah.
such a huge way that sounds like a sermon in there somewhere, right? Do a little obedience, and you let somebody else figure out how it's going to multiply.
Yeah, the turning point in his life, one of the turning points was there was a guy who said to him once, "The world has yet to see what God will do with one man totally consecrated to him."
Hmm.
And Moody at one point said, "By God's grace, I'll be that man." The
Um,
estimate is by the time he died, somewhere around 100 million people had either heard him speak or read one of his messages. And this is
wow.
a guy with 5 years of formal education.
And that's something.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic.
Yep.
Thank you, Dr. Gregg Quiggle, for joining us and enlightening us and helping us learn more about Dwight Moody. And for those of you who are checking all this out on YouTube, we hope you'll continue to follow us on our social media. You can find the links to all of that, be able to learn more about our ministry and more about what we're doing and being able to tell more people about the things of Christian history. So go back to our webpage, if you will, at christianhistory.com, the Center for Christian History.com, and follow along in some of the great things that our smart people are telling you all about. So very fine. Thanks so much.